Brett Yormark has an idea for how he wants the college football playoff to be formed moving forward. Is it a good one? I absolutely think so. We're going to discuss it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time tuning into this show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase today. My name is JT Wistrcill, the host of this show, and I'm excited to be joined by Brice Larson, co-host of Brice and Bianucci on 7 to 10 a.m. on 103.9 and 98.3 FM, the Utah ESPN Radio Network. Brice, college football is trying to figure out a lot of things right now. We have the House settlement. There's the new commission as well. It's going to be kind of trying to regulate some of the NIL stuff. But one thing that's been not as much drawing the headlines right now, but has been a big discussion as of late is, hey, what's the future of the college football playoff looks like? They already changed it. So like, hey, they're going to a straight seeding model. So the best teams get to be up top. You win your conference. If Utah wins the conference, they're in the playoff no matter what, but they are not guaranteed one of the top four highest spots, which I do think overall it's a good move. I don't think the Big 12 and ACC should have given that up so soon just because of what the SEC and Big 10 are trying to do. But I thought overall that was good for the competitive, just it's how things should be, right? The best team should get the best spots, which is also how Brett Yormark feels about the college football playoff. He said the Big 12 wants 5 auto qualifiers and 11 at-large spots for the 26 playoffs, and just feels like that's the most fair model. And he said, I'm all about fairness, and I absolutely agree with him. I think this is how it should be. If it's going to go to 16, I think 16 is a lot of teams, but if we're going to let them in, I have always said 4 AQs for the SEC and Big 10 is wild, especially when most years they would just earn it. But if there's ever a year they're bad, I just don't think a team should just get in 4 spots deep. I still think it's something you got to earn. I like this proposal, and if they're going to do a 16-team playoff, this is absolutely how it should be to me.
I agree with you, but I'm a little bit worried and skeptical that the College Football Playoff Committee will lean towards the Big 12 or ACC. I think there's a reason why the SEC and the Big 10 has come out and said, yeah, we'll give up the 4 automatic qualifiers. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that they would just give up that easily unless they were really sure that everything was going to go their way and that possibly that College Football Playoff Committee was going to lean towards the SEC in the way that they choose their teams. We've already seen it. It's out there. We know it. There's an SEC bias in everything. JT, there was 14 SEC teams that made it into the NCAA tournament last year when there was no reason they needed to do so. They made like a record $70 million off of the units that they get from getting into the NCAA tournament a season ago. I think there is an SEC bias, and I'm worried that they know if they're going to go to the 5+11 college football playoff model with 16 teams, that there will be that bias that leans towards the SEC, and they're going to get more than just the 4 teams into the college football playoff. That worries me. It shouldn't be that easy to have a compromise with the SEC in this.
I agree. And that's a really good point. Just based on their history, like why are they willing to concede this when we're talking about a Greg Sankey who was just a week ago giving out pamphlets about like he was basically begging the media to like recognize how difficult this conference is, which I felt like was so ridiculous. And I talked about that on either talked about it on a show coming up. Just some of the comments that Sankey made I thought were really ridiculous, especially how they love to just totally like ignore how they did in bowl games where they had a number of losses to Big 10 teams and but either way. Anyways, just going, look, if you look at last year's format, if we apply the 16-team playoff format, Big 10 would have gotten their 4 teams in, so the 4 auto bids. SEC would have gotten 6 in. The Alabamas, the Ole Miss, the South Carolina, all controversially being left out more so from an SEC standpoint, they all would have gotten in. So I do think that that's where this comes in. They're like, oh, we could get 16 in. That's probably where they're willing to concede it. The reason I do think, though, this is good, number one, I am just a fan of college football, and I've always been a believer the best team should get in. I thought the committee got it right last year, putting an SMU team in that earned the right to be there. And I do think on a neutral site field, they absolutely could have beaten Alabama. So that's why I'm glad they made that decision there. But speaking of an SMU, like we look what the ACC did last year. They had 2 teams in, and they nearly had 3 teams in, right? Miami was one of the first ones left out too. So it was Miami, SMU, and Clemson. Like you get 3 teams in if you're at the ACC in the 16-team format. That's why I think Brett Yormark likes this. I think it's the best chance for the Big 12 to be able to get 3, maybe even 4 teams in, which is exciting in an era where, like we just talked about, that SEC Big 10 bias exists, and they're trying to box out the SEC, or they're trying to box out the Big 12. The fact that you get that many teams in, maybe 3 to 4, is incredibly exciting for the Big 12.
Yeah, it definitely can be. The one thing that worries me, once again, you go back to last year, is that BYU wasn't even in the conversation out of the Big 12. They won 11 football games last season. That's insane to me.
Yeah.
And just, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's BYU or anybody else from the Big 12, they should at least be in the conversation. At one point, there were conversations that were being had that, maybe like Navy or Army, I think it was Army, who was undefeated at one point, could jump the Big 12 champion and the Big 12 would be left out altogether. That's a little worrisome if you're the Big 12. Now, what needs to happen in order for that not to be the case moving forward is Big 12 has to play better in non-conference schedules. They have to have the top of the league be as close to undefeated as possible, and there can't be as much parity in the league. That's what needs to happen. There's too much parity in the Big 12. It's bad to say. We love parity, right? That's why we love the NFL at times. But there's too much parity in the NFL. The top of the league has to be very good for the league to get the respect that it deserves.
You're right. And that's what happened. Pac-12. It really hurt the Pac-12. The fact that you had Pac-12 After Dark games where these teams would come to life. And I mean, the truth is, it's just hard to be a really good team in college football. I think that's what we see time and time again. So you're going to have those upsets, but it's how do you avoid them? So I do feel like this is a format that fits and favors Utah, because I look at this format now and it goes, okay, 16 teams in, 11 at large. You're Utah. If you win 10 games, granted, you probably have to win your conference championship then, so guys make it 11. Like, it's going to be hard for any 10-2 team to get in, but it's at least possible. Or relying on other chaos. If you look really good, if maybe that loss came against a good non-conference team too, that's where you're going to have a chance if you're a Utah. And I think that does excite me. That like I mentioned, 16 is too much for my liking, and just in general, I think we are thinning out the pool overall. But if it means Utah has a better chance to get in a era that, in just a sport right now that does buyer the top 2 conferences, that gets me excited. So I do think this model is good for Utah.
I think Utah is the one team in the in the Big 12 that has the national cachet of going to a couple of Rose Bowls the last decade, where they would have the respect nationally to say, okay, that Utah brand is a brand that if they have 2 losses, 3 losses, they can still get into the college football playoff with the benefit of the doubt. I think that's one of the only teams, maybe a Kansas State, maybe an Oklahoma State with Gundy at the helm of it. If they're good enough, they could have the cachet to jump in as that kind of at-large team just because of the cachet that they carry with them and the brand name.
I agree. I totally feel that way. And it's something we would love to see is Utah crash the party this year in the 12-team format. It's going to require, if 10-2 is even going to be really hard to get in if you're Utah. But we'll see what happens. It's a really good Big 12 conference, and a lot of teams are going to be capable of getting in. And as Utah tries to contend in the future of college football, obviously one of the biggest things they'll rely on is rev sharing. This is an athletics department now that can give $20 million across their sports. So the question then becomes, how much should football give? How much should basketball get? Those are questions we are going to be answering in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, and the finals have been electric. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their mind. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. I got a chance to go to a first-round playoff game last year, and I absolutely love it. And this year's matchups are already delivering. And if you want to get in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats. Even for the biggest playoff games, prices on the app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. They have great last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. You can go and get a zone deal right now. They're offering up to 60% off in great sections. There's that Game Time guarantee, which I love. You know you're getting the best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, they'll credit me 110% of the difference. Also, that exact view, you get a view of your seat, so you know when you're making your purchase, okay, this is what it's going to look like. It's just something that Game Time offers that I absolutely love. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. The Game Time app you can also download as well. The last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed when you visit Game Time today. All right, Brice, it's basically time to play Mark Harlan. That's what you and I are going to be doing. We're going to be Utah's athletic director and saying, hey, if we were in charge, how would we, and I don't know if Mark's the only one who makes this decision, I'll say that, but if we were in charge of the revenue sharing, how much would we give to each school? And basically saying, therefore, like how much we think that Utah should give to each school. And what we're going to do for this is just say like, hey, genuinely, like where should you put the resources? Like, especially in a world where, hey, football drives the mothership, that is a college athletic program. Men's basketball is second. And I know like the gymnastics team, they sell more tickets. So they're a very valuable commodity, but the TV deals you get for men's basketball still exceed that gymnastics value to me. So we'll talk about each sport, and we got to start with football first. So I'll open it up to you first, Brice. How much of your $20.5 million, that's how much you get this year, that number is going to increase over the years. The report by Dellinger said by the time we get in the 2030s, this could be like 35 plus million, which is just incredible to think about. But how much of this 20.5 million right now are you spending on football?
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to come down the pipeline for these kids. It's a good thing, though. Here's how I would do it, because the SEC and some SEC teams have kind of put out, and it's been publicized where teams are going to go. Georgia, for example, has said that they are going to spend $13.5 million at least on their football team. That's about 75% of that revenue sharing money. So if you want to compete with SEC football programs, if you want to compete with SEC schools, you have to invest like SEC schools. And I would at least do 75% of that, which would be right about that $13.5 million mark for football only.
Yeah, Ross Dellinger said you'll see teams go from anywhere from 70 to 85. And I'm someone, and I say, hey, football, as I said, football's the moneymaker. It's Utah's best sport that they have in terms of, yes, gymnastics has had more success, but of the major ones, like you're trying to win. Utah's basketball program is not like a Houston in the Big 12 where they're contending for national championships. I think Utah should go all in. I think they should give $16 million. I don't know if that amounts up to 85%, what percentage exactly that ends up being, but I would go that far in. I would give $16 million to football. I want to continue to try to get the best players in the transfer portal. And yes, Utah's NIL might not be BYU's overall, but the fact that Utah got a Devin Dampier already, right? Wayshawn Parker, Utah obviously had to make a good enough offer just to get Spencer Fano to stay. I think he was always going to stay. Seems like an incredibly loyal individual, but you got to be able to come up and pay those guys and give them what they're worth. Utah's shown they can do that. So I would only continue to invest in that, pair that rev share money with your collective as well, which that's another thing. Like just because we have the rev share doesn't mean the collectives aren't still going to be able to contribute and help fund athletics too. So I would genuinely go $16 million to try and make this football program the best it can be, because we know how much the Texas Tech, the BYUs, and obviously those Big Ten and SEC teams are spending. I think you got to give as much as you can to football without going too crazy. You're not giving football $20 million. You have to give some of your other athletics. Those teams deserve that. The athletes deserve that. And you still want to be able to compete at high level. You don't want to be getting blown out in every other sport and be awesome at football. So I would go 16 million. What do you say to that?
No, I think that's totally fine. The one thing that I'm curious to see is how Title IX comes into this with the way that the money shakes out, and they're going to, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits with all of this. And I think you're going to see a couple of Title IX issues pop up here and there, and we'll see what happens. I mean, at some point there might have to be kind of more of like a representative percentage of how many female athletes versus male athletes, whatever it may be. However they do it, we'll find out. But as of right now, I think, go all in while you can and try and be as good at football as you possibly can, because it brings in a lot of money for the entire university.
Yeah, and that will be the interesting thing. Just as we mentioned, look, football brings in the most money, but you want to still give gymnastics and women's basketball that same opportunity. But if those sports aren't generating, it's like, it's hard to justify, let's give 10 million to football and then let's give 10 million to gymnastics and women's basketball. That just, you're not going to get the same return on investments. We've seen the crowds that Utah draws, and you already mentioned what a brand Utah football is in the first segment. It's just, they're a different level brand than some of those other programs are. We'll get to the gymnastics program in a moment though, which is an incredible brand. So then we get to men's basketball. To me, just because of the TV deal, that's the one it's probably going to get. And this is what every college athletic program is pretty much going to do. Football will get the most, then basketball gets the next most. So for me, I'm giving men's basketball $2 million. I think you have to be right around this threshold at least if you want to compete with some of the best in the Big 12. I expect the Houstons of the world to be giving even more. Arizona will probably give even more too. So you want to be able to at least make competitive offers with these guys as well too. It's probably not as much as some of the other teams will give, but it's a growing sport with what Alex Jensen has done too, an ascending just program, I should say, that Utah has. So I would go around $2 million for the men's basketball team. What would you do what would you give Alex Jensen if you were Mark Harlan?
I'd probably either go 2.5 or 2.7. That puts them
Okay.
around 15% of the
Mm-hmm.
revenue sharing money. Just
Mm-hmm.
because with that much money, you can go out and you can get one player who changes the entire basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
You could go and find a guy for 1.5 million and give him an extra NIL on top of it. That's a real NIL deal, and have a dude that can change that entire team. And it really takes is like one or two guys, and then you fill in the rest of the roster with a bunch of role players that can really win some basketball games. And it's a lot easier to win basketball games than it is football games. So I would go right about there, 2.5 to 2.7, about 15% of the revenue sharing money.
You're absolutely right. One individual affects basketball as a player much more than football because you can spend a ton on your QB. You ain't got an offensive
Yeah.
line to protect him. It doesn't going to matter. We saw what happened last year when Utah had the offensive line. They weren't able to get the quarterback play. How that worked out too. Versus there's a reason BYU is going all in on AJ Dembonsa, and we've seen this before. The Cooper Flags of the world. Granted, those players are rare, right? But like one player can make that level of a difference too. So that is obviously something that Utah will have to bear in mind. So then you get to gymnastics and women's basketball. To me, are the next two sports that Utah should invest the next most NIL in for me, or the rev sharing for me. To me, I would go at $1 million or just below for women's basketball and gymnastics, honestly. Maybe, and that's where, look, I'm not in the athletic department. Maybe I need to see charts of things of like, oh, well, actually, let's do this and that. But honestly, I want to remain at the forefront of gymnastics program. You're going to try and reach 50 straight national championships next year. I want the rev share to continue to help keep this Utah gymnastics program, which is one of the best gymnastics programs in the country, going. And the women's basketball program is ascending too. The Big 12 is a tough conference too for women's basketball. We saw Utah barely get in to the NCAA tournament. We know they lost Gianna Neepkins as well too. So they're in a little bit of a rebuild, I think. And they're a sport too with the ascension of women's basketball as well. Like they deserve that NIL investment. So I would go closer to $1 million for those two sports as well. And what makes Utah so unique compared to these other schools that you've mentioned, Georgia a couple times, right? And Georgia has a gymnastics program, but the level of hype and excellence that the Red Rocks have achieved is a different factor in all of this than most athletic programs are going to have to deal with.
No doubt, no doubt. And I'd be right there with you, just about $900,000 for each one of those as well. Keep it right around that $1 million mark, and I think you're going to be competitive across the entire landscape of the rest of college athletics. I think a lot of teams will probably, and a lot of other schools will probably go lower with that. If they want to go all in on football, they probably go lower and put more towards men's basketball, women's basketball, and football. But yeah, I would probably keep it right there about that $1 million mark, or $800,000 to $900,000.
What's fascinating about all this is we're talking about 18 million for football, or 16 million for football. I said we're 2 million for men's basketball. The gymnastics women's basketball program is getting close to $1 million, if not exactly that. You're still going to have every single one of those coaches saying we need more. It's just the wild era of college athletics we're going into right now, especially so if we're going off of what I said, right, that leaves about like $500,000 left for the other sports. And you probably need to figure out a way to give them a little bit more of that. Maybe that's where some of the collective stuff goes, but like you just built a new baseball venue. You want the baseball program to improve. And that has not been a great program there for a couple of years now, right? Like how much goes into golf? Like, I don't know if it's much, but it's just like, hey, you have a nice golf facility up there. You have a golf program that has had some success a couple of years as well, too. So how do you support and fund that? Your swimming, your soccer, there's a lot of challenges into this, because while it's awesome you got this 20.5 million, so does everyone else who has the same collective. So it's a very interesting dilemma, just how you manage all of this rev share money across your sports now if you're Utah.
No doubt. And now you're going to have the NIL Go, which the clearinghouse that will go through each NIL deal and try and figure out if it's an actual brand deal and accept or deny them. We'll see how many lawsuits come from that as well. But you could add that NIL, if they're real NIL contracts, on top of this other revenue sharing money, and you can add that to other sports and other athletes around campus and really add on to that money that you're going to see go in there. We'll see how that all shakes out, but that's another interesting aspect of all of this too.
It's an incredibly interesting aspect, and it's just going to be very interesting to see how Utah manages. I mean, Brice, I mentioned baseball. Like, what would you do if you're Utah, like in your baseball? Are you trying to give that sport a little more money to make it better, or are you just going to keep them in line with some of the others? Like we know the SEC and some of the other Big 12 programs, they're going to throw a lot at baseball. That's probably where some of that gymnastics money that Utah, I think gymnastics is a higher priority for Utah. I think they will invest more in gymnastics than baseball. So if you want to get your baseball program up to that level, how do you go about doing that? I think it's a very interesting question.
No, that is a very interesting question, and it's going to be a tough answer because right now, as it stands, there's not a lot of NIL money in college baseball. From what I understand, the top SEC players are only making about $100,000 from what I've been told, which is not a lot for the top of
Yes.
the cream of the crop of baseball. $100,000, that's not a lot of money. So you're exactly right. I think you could be competitive in college baseball if you only throw them, I don't know, not very much money, right? For those types of players. Now, that's just one player on a big, massive roster, too. So we'll see. But I think if you're Utah, you kind of have to go in on that gymnastics program a little bit more than baseball, too.
Agreed.
So that is kind of the conundrum that they're in right now, along with women's basketball, because women's basketball has been fantastic. So you have to give them their dues, too. There's just not enough money to go around and make everybody happy. And that's going to be something that will be fascinating to see how they deal with and what Mark Harlan decides to do here.
Which is wild because what we just mentioned, you're adding 20.5 million, but because everyone else is too, it's still going to be very similar issues. But I agree with everything you said. You have to me, keep the programs that have earned it and been successful the priority. Yeah. You can find ways to still invest in and try to give those other teams the upper hand, but that's where also at the end of the day, like it's on Utah to hire the right people, like for baseball, like, or not hire, excuse me, they got coaches up there obviously, but like recruit the right players. You got to find those diamonds in the rough. The reason that Utah football was able to rise atop the ranks, that's what it's going to take for Utah baseball as well. And I do think having their own venue, and I know Brice, you do a lot with Utah Valley too. I think having their own venue for Utah is going to help drive a lot too. And I think even students as well, it'll be like, hey, let's just drive over to, I'm forgetting the street it's on. I used to live like right next to it, honestly, or for when I was in college, but like it's right there. Like that's so much closer than even Swiss Ballpark. You got to go through downtown traffic and everything. Like when you're a college student, that's just more of a hassle. I feel like this having a stadium close to campus and just a building you can call your own, as much as I love Smith's Ballpark, is a big thing for this baseball team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You got to have on-campus facilities for the guys to be able to go there. Got to be nice. They're going to be brand new as well. It's going to help with recruiting quite a bit, and we'll see if it ends up making that program be better.
It is going to be interesting to see. Just like I still can't even imagine the part of Ross Dellinger, Yahoo Sports, has done a great job breaking all this down. The fact of revenue sharing, the fact that like in a couple of years, this is going to be like 35 million. This number could be right. So like we could have just football rosters, 25 million. Like, basketball is getting 5, men's are, all your other sports, like maybe some of those are getting 2 even. This is absolutely wild. The state of college athletics, the direction we're heading in. And there's lots of shakeups and changes, including something that's happened with a Utah program, not University of Utah, but Utah Valley. Utah Valley is going to the Big West Conference in 2026. We're just your reaction to all this as well, too. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you think this could affect Utah, because these two teams do play each other a lot in some of the other sports.
Yeah, it's definitely a step up from the Western Athletic Conference, in my opinion. I was talking with the commissioner of the Big West, Dan Butterly, just the other day, and he said that when he took over as the commissioner of the Big West Conference, in terms of basketball, Big West was hovering around 20th in the nation as a conference. Not great. Now they just cracked the top 10 this last season. And we're almost a 2-bid conference with UC San Diego and UC Irvine, who won 30-plus games a season ago. UC Irvine lost in the NIT championship game, probably should have been in the NCAA tournament over a 50 or 500 win SEC team, but we won't go down that road. UC San Diego is fantastic. Went into Utah State, knocked them off in the Spectrum, tough place to play. Ended up playing Michigan, probably should have won that game, couldn't quite get it done down the stretch as a 12 seed. They're fantastic in basketball. They're even better in baseball. They were a 2-bid baseball conference, really good all around, and the Olympic sports are insane. Here's the thing about the Big West is that obviously none of those schools sponsor football. So with the revenue sharing, they can go 75% of their revenue sharing for men's basketball. What does that mean for the rest of the country too? You're going to be talking about if they can pull the money, that's the question. If they have $20.5 million sitting around, there's some that I think will, that have pretty deep pockets in terms of donors. They can go, 15, 16 million on basketball and go all in on a sport that makes them money. And that's exciting if you're a Big West institution. You could see like a Wichita State style run to the Final Four from a Big West school. And if they have the funding, if they have that type of donorship and that type of support, that's a reality for some of these schools. And it'll be fun to watch if that's going to be the case.
It will be fun to watch, and it'll be interesting to see how, as I mentioned, Utah versus Utah Valley. What does that look like? I expect the two schools to play each other a ton in baseball and softball still. That's just a sport with how much travel, how many games you're involved. If you got teams that are close like that, you're going to play them. I'd say the same thing with soccer. They'll continue to play each other there. It'll be interesting to see if Utah basketball and Utah Valley end up playing each other a little bit more. Men's basketball, we were talking before the show, Utah Valley's beaten BYU like several times over the last few years too. And I mean, this is a really strong program. They have a good history there as well too. But do you think we'll see more games now against Utah athletic programs? Do you think we'll see about the same? Does this impact things at all in your eyes?
I think it will, depending on one thing. And you look at the rankings, from what I've been told, it's all coaching staffs that schedule these schedules. Very little to do with athletic directors when you get into the mid-major portions. And then, of course, it's coaching staffs that do the brunt of the work, and it's all about who you know. Here's the thing, is that these coaching staffs don't want to face a Utah Valley team that's between a 1 to 200 in the net rankings, because it doesn't help them if they win that game. And if they lose it, they weren't supposed to lose that ball game if you're Utah. If they are in the top 100 and they're consistently in the top 100, now all of a sudden, that's a really good game. So if Utah Valley can get and stay in the top 100 of the net rankings year in and year out, much like a Grand Canyon has done out of the Western Athletic Conference, they've been able to schedule Arizona State at home. They've been able to schedule. They brought in Stanford last year at home. They've had some really great games because they're consistently in the top 100. Mm-hmm. Utah Valley's hovered around 120 to 130, so they are right there, just outside of the top 100. If this helps them to get up that one extra bump in recruiting, they could be right there, and you could see games in the future with Utah, Utah State, BYU on the schedule for Utah Valley. I think this is going to be a really good jump up for them.
I think so too. And I love it when the schools from the state play each other, like especially ones like Utah Valley, where it can be a game. Like I think it's a good challenge for Utah. I talked about earlier on one of my shows this week about how Utah's like 2028 schedule is kind of them ramping up for the Big 12 gauntlet play. That year they have like their Utah Tech. That's one level. Level 2 is you play Nevada, like a group of 5 team, and then you play Wisconsin. Like to me, that Utah Valley would be the comparable one I would look at to it, like a Nevada. Like, okay, this is the next level, next step up. Especially just when you look at that program, what they've done. You already mentioned a top 10 basketball conference too. So it's something I'd love to see. I hope we get more of that in the future. And it's an ever evolving and changing world of college athletics. That much is for certain. Brice, always good. Oh yeah, you want to add something else?
One final thing. If you watch college baseball this last couple weeks, regional, super regionals, Utah Valley goes to the Eugene Regional. Mm-hmm. They knock off Oregon. Who knocks out Oregon? It's Cal Poly. What conference are they from? They're from the Big West Conference. So you had one future Big West opponent, one current Big West team. They both beat Oregon on their home turf. The difference in amount of money that those players, first of all, are making in NIL, astronomical. We're talking probably over $1 million getting paid to Oregon baseball players. There's no reason why Utah Valley and Cal Poly should have beaten Oregon, yet they did. That's because those kids want to be there. They actually want to play baseball. They're not there for the flash and frills. They're there to win ball games, and that's what Utah Valley and Cal Poly went in there and did, and knocked off the 14th ranked team in the nation in Oregon. So that's the type of competition you're going to see out of the Big West.
It's a great point, and it goes back to the very first one we were making about Big 12, ACC versus SEC, and Big 10. Anyone can beat anyone on any given day, and it's going to be interesting to see. Just give them a chance. That's all we want, and hopefully college football will do that, but we'll wait and see. It's a wild world right now. Brice, always appreciate you coming on, making the time. Please let everyone know about everything you got going on and where they can find you at.
No doubt. 103.9, 98.3 FM across the state of Utah. We're on from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., and we've got some pretty good guests lined up for all-time college football playoff executive director Rich Clark going to be joining us. Make sure you hit us up on the Brice and Bianucci podcast. If you catch this a little bit too late, you can listen to it there as well. You can always follow me on Twitter at Larson Sports, LARSON Sports. That's where you can find me.
There you go, Brice. You're the best. Thanks for making the time, man.
Appreciate you, JT.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking the latest in Utah football and Utah athletics. We hope you'll see us then.